This list isn't a trove of recommendations or some glowing proclamation of the greatness of 2010's anime. It is hopefully an accurate description of the top 26 anime that I watched from this decade, even if I'm not as passionate about every show featured. It's mostly unordered, so to supplement that, I'll be showing this logo on screen for shows that I think will remain favorites for a long time to come, and this logo for shows that I think are worth re-watching anyway. Rather than a strict ranking, the numbers are more or less meant to reflect my general feeling on the show. I don't, for example, really like Nichijou all that much more than Inferno Cop. And on a different day they could switch places, but as the gaps between shows increase, it becomes more likely that I liked one more than the other. But I'm sure some of you are asking, why top 26?
Because I like to go step and come.
Fuck this show!
Imoto sae ireba ii opens on a parody scene that absolutely dunks on the little sister shows that started gaining popularity in the early 2010s with the breakout success that was Oreimo. The scene in question is the much sought after wake-up event, which often appears in the emoticon oeuvre in question. In parallel to jabs like this, it often treats its genre contemporaries with a respect that can only come from someone all too self-aware with how strange and yet strangely common their tastes are. Imo Sae relishes in the otaku-oriented incest tropes it presents, but it doesn't take itself seriously. The end result is a somewhat cliché take on the dialogue between anime fans and their media, but the heart and soul of the show is making fun of that cliché. The main character is a pastiche of light novel protagonists new and old, nice guy emoticons with just enough libido to scope out some ass, but not enough to ever push the rating into 18+ territory. The hilarious twist in this case is that Kosuke Brosuke over here, it doesn't actually have a little sister. Comedic existentialism ensues. When Oreimo came out in 2010, it was already abusing every anime trope in existence with a wink and a nod, so it's not that Imo Sae is unique, it just winks and nods with the awkward intensity of an actual horny 14-year-old. The other subject which the show comments on is light novels. Big surprise. Light novels are trashy, and the show makes sure you know that, but its main point is however taboo or smutty they might be, a lot of them still come from passionate authors just trying to express themselves. Because not everyone has the talent to be original. In the best scene of the show, one of the main character's friends almost cries because the anime adaptation of his light novel series is getting shit reviews on Twitter. I fucking LOL'd at this scene. It's hilarious, yet it highlights that not all light novel authors pick up the pen to make infinite Stratos clones for quick cash. If you grew up reading Japanese light novels like I did, the show is definitely worth a try, otherwise it's not something I would recommend to literally anyone. Sore ga Seiyuu is a light-hearted cute girl show about 3 seiyus aspiring to greater heights and working their way up the industry. The show is unrealistically optimistic, generally lacking the bite that other comic and cartoon representations of Japanese comic and cartoon industries tend to have, such as Bakuman or Shirobako. But if you share the passion the main characters have for voice acting, then you'll be just as excited as they are when anime caricatures of famous Japanese VAs appear and guide them on their journey to become successful seiyus. Yes, these characters are played by the actual actors they are meant to represent. No off-brand Hideaki Annos here, heh. Look, it's Rie Kyugumiya. Oh? Yui Horie? Totally radical. To add to whatever realism is left that hasn't been washed away by the bright pastels, the main characters were actually played by rookie voice actors, and some of them went on to be decently successful. Tsuredure Children is one of the most satisfying rom-coms to date, with characters progressing their romantic relationships at lightning speed, coupled with extremely tight and memorable gags. The character designs aren't memorable, but they're low resolution enough to be extremely readable and easy to understand, which the show absolutely needs to deliver on its premise. Basically, a bunch of different characters have crushes on each other. They all live in the same school, and by the end of the show, most of them are together. What's great about this premise is that it provides literally endless material for the show to work on. You don't have to sit through 3 seasons just to see one pair of characters kissing. Once one conflict between a couple is resolved, the show moves on to the next one with a different couple. The breezy pacing, comfy attitude, simple backgrounds, and quick 8-minute episodes blend into a TV anime that is even easier to watch than it is to nap on a Saturday afternoon. Shirobako's aesthetic is pretty bland, even if you compare it to other shows PA Works has produced, but it makes up for the lackluster CG racing scenes by representing the anime industry in a semi-realistic way. I would probably still be referring to cuts as scenes or shots if I hadn't watched the show, and for that I thank it. There is genuinely useful information about how anime is produced in this show. Depictions of industry veterans giving main characters advice helps add to the realism. If dumping facts about anime production is all the show is good for, though, it would still be a worthwhile experience, especially for anime fans. But the subtle if unrealistic documentary on anime production is layered beneath a genuinely interesting story about young, inexperienced artists trying to come into their own in a precarious working environment. Anime production's rough stuff, and the show never compromises on this message. One of the most memorable moments from the show is when an older veteran explains that artists should focus on getting fast while they are young, because if they don't learn how, by the time they are old, it will be too late. This advice and other moments like it have really stuck with me, even if I don't enjoy the experience of watching the show as much. Houseki no Kuni just sticks with me no matter how much I protest. The 3D CG never leaves my mind, and if I'm recommending the show for any reason, it's because the visuals and the direction are extremely memorable. I won't lie though, the writing can be cheesy, and the tone shift from a lighthearted adventure to a melodramatic drama towards the middle probably pisses me off more than it should. I crave lighthearted fantasy adventure narratives, so when the show subverts my expectations by becoming something different halfway through, I get the big frowny. I just don't like edgy fos as much as I like genki fos. That being said, it's not like the plot is all bad. The premise feels like the perfect conduit for dissecting biological determinism. Fos and friends are literally solid, static, in a world whose rules are seemingly less chaotic than our own. However, this is flipped on its head when Fos learns that change is inevitable, and from there her spiral into depression only makes sense. I'm a little tired of underdog narratives where a character starts out as canonically weaker without room for upward mobility, and then just gets stronger anyway. But it serves the show well as its intention is to contradict our understanding of hierarchies. Is it still kinda annoying that Fos gets power-ups as frequently as mother freaking Super Mario? Yeah, but it's forgivable when the show is so gosh darn enjoyable to look at. Tatami Galaxy's quick-witted, fast-paced spunk isn't just a conduit for silly dialogue or entry-level observations on college life. It's all too obvious that the reason anyone goes to college is partially due to societal expectations, and everyone has felt the repetitive thump of the military drum which leads young kids through the stale march of adult life. From the back of the procession, doubtful thoughts rear and trumpet blast into your ears alone. Am I doing this right? Am I an adult yet? The only rational course of action is to plunge face first into wherever your idea of a rose-colored campus life might take you, but college necessitates repetition, and so does learning. Tatami Galaxy explores the sometimes horrifying reality that maybe nothing will change for the better, in ways both subtle and obvious, sentimental and dramatic. Lavish with a lovable style, the show never stops being fun to watch, and that is its greatest strength. It's been interesting watching different studios try out new release formats throughout the decade. In 2009, Bakemonogatari aired 12 of its 15 episodes on TV, and then put the last 3 online. The Monogatari series breaks free of the typical seasonal format for ongoing shows through movies, web shorts, and by breaking the mold of 12 to 13 24-minute episodes per televised season. Hanamonogatari is one such case. Because it doesn't need to conform to the typical structure of a TV show, Hanamonogatari gets to tell its story on its own terms, and the show is better for it. A bitter rivalry resurfaces, causing trouble for Kanbaru, that eventually resolves satisfyingly. Kanbaru is one of my favorite Monogatari characters, and getting to live through her development with her at the main helm of the narrative is great. Ugh. Inferno Cop is like if someone with 2000 IQ made a YouTube poop. You remember watching those shitty fucking Adult Swim cartoons with barely any animation, like Aqua Teen Hunger Force or Home Videos or something? This is kind of like those shows except without any chill. It's like they had a shit ton of energy drinks or something. Inferno Cop's been drinking one too many caffeinated beverages. There's a lot to love about this show, like how all the characters are played by one person doing different retarded voices or references. Like the entire ending is just an ever reference, and like the FBI guys who just say FBI over and over again. Yeah, that's fucking good. The fact files just add unnecessary, nonsensical, but kind of serious lore, which really contrasts the tone of the show in a way that gives me the big giggle. They really enjoy shows where you can see the creator's thumbprints, and Inferno Cop is a show where you can see every single hand working on it in the background. I mean, just imagine some trigger guy puppeting Mr. Judge around in Adobe. And that narrative, the narrative of people making the silly show, is one which can also be enjoyed just by watching Inferno Cop regularly. The original Little Witch Academia movie delights the senses with funny characters that have goofy faces, and soothes the mind with a comfortable palette of colors that you just want to be friends with. Akko is stupid, Sushi and Lot aren't. How will a trio of such different people get along in this wacky, witchy wonderland? I'll admit that I relate to Akko as much as I do all the other characters. Who hasn't felt like a fucking idiot every now and then, or a sensual, overly empathic, autistic child, or a mischievous master of medicinal mushrooms and poison? The setting isn't particularly original, but it makes up for that with the heart and passion I'm sure Yo-Yo Shinari has been storing up since its inception, as a wee idea in his brain. Also, mad ups to Trigger for kickstarting this and other projects through crowdfunding. I'm not saying it's the future of anime, but I appreciate the creators looking outside of the industry for sources of revenue. LWA is an anime that could only exist now in the 21st century, and I think that's pretty neat. Number 17. I love this show just as much for the gut-busting comedy and the heart-pounding animation as I do for the moments when it takes a step back to just express something unique about the characters. Oftentimes, these scenes are more awkward than funny, and I really appreciate that the show isn't all laughs all the time. I dig the variance between facial expressions, which often act like little punchlines between big comedic victory laps. The somewhat simplistic designs lend themselves to creativity, and the scenes which don't take themselves seriously. Not every joke lands, though, especially when the show relies heavily on non-sequiturs. But I enjoy these little moments anyway, not just because they're funny half the time, but also because they're cute. And it's really the heart and soul of the show. It's inoffensive in the best way possible. The faded background, general tone, and sound design never let you relish in just how embarrassingly awkward these characters are. It's all good vibes from episode 1 to 26. Do you like pastels? I do. The show presents not a bleak view of the post-apocalypse, but a quiet one. Humanity is far past its glory days of sophisticated technology, super-violent war, and progress towards a better tomorrow. But there is some kind of peace nonetheless. Often the exploits of our main character and others involve the exploration of ruins, broken factories, or just generally confronting the troubles of living as a bygone species. The new hipness, fairies, have taken over and roam the wilderness in destruction like childish Lovecraftian gangsters. They like to fuck with people for fun, and wacky random insanity ensues. If you're like me who still rewatches old YouTube poops and you think random XD internet humor is just as funny as it was 10 years ago, then you'll like this show just fine. What's beyond humor, though, is genuinely intriguing. There are messages about identity, how fandom spreads, weird time loop shenanigans, and more, aided by an asynchronous chronology, allowing for a lot of variety between episodes. Ultimately, this show is pleasant to look at, so whatever subject matter it covers, I'm always engaged in the moment-to-moment. You see, back when Ufotable wasn't just a machine for pumping out Fate anime and edge bait, they made art, like real art, with teeth. Yuri Seijin Naoko-san is here to let you know just how hip and radical porn is. This 20-minute short is pure indulgence, and it dares anyone to question that indulgence. Like, we're gonna make everything gay, and you're gonna like it. And as any respectful otaku would, I did like it. The character designs are adorable and perfect. The music video at the end is fucking beautiful and chilling. Yuri porn is just as deep, if not deeper, than Tolstoy. Space Dandy is a pseudo-anthology where each episode a new director was given free rein to do seemingly whatever the fuck they wanted given the setting and the characters. The one consistency is dandy, because dandy is everything. From the first moment that Dandy appears on screen arguing why ass is better than tits, to the final where he's piloting a BDSM Statue of Liberty mech and slicing through lasers with a lightsaber, Dandy is an absolute marvel to behold. He is, of course, the perfect character for an anthology like this. He's a suave, silver-tongued alien hunting savant, but he's also just a big idiot. No matter what direction each episode takes his character in, he always feels believable and internally consistent, as if he's operating on a foreign logic just within our grasp, yet simultaneously far, far away from our reality. I'd recommend Dandy to any deeper fan of Japanimation, but also to newbies to see where their tastes lie. Did you like the weird, goopy, sentient plants episode the most? Watch Kaiba. Did you like the goofy space ramen episode the most? Well, here's a bunch of other stuff Sayo Yamamoto directed. There's a court case episode, there's a zombie episode, there's a musical episode, and they're all great. But the Unyang Choi episode was the best. When I was young, there were two shows I would rewatch semi-regularly, and those shows were Serial Experiments Lane and Denpa Onna to Seishun Otoko. I still rewatch Lane like every 2 years or so, but it's been probably 8 years since I've seen Denpa Onna, so my memories of it aren't so concrete. Even still, a lot of what the show was saying was important to me as a kid, and I can still remember Eryo Towa saying, "Fuck you, gravity." And I remember the ideas in the show which planted skepticism in my young mind, in all things I had been taught growing up. Ryuko's conversation about why mystery is compelling, and I remember the soundtrack which I occasionally listen to today and would sometimes try to play on the piano way back when. Ryuko was my first waifu. I owe a lot to this show for getting me into anime, for getting me into Shaft and Shimbo, for making me question superstition. Back when I was a little kid, I pretty much only watched harem shows. It was the only story I wanted to connect with, partially for the girls, but also to get some sense of affection or attention I wasn't getting from my parents. I'm much older now, and I don't really relate to how unbelievable harem stories tend to be, but I think Denpa Onna came at a time when I needed it. It had the correct signifiers and a story to make me interested, and on top of that, generally intrigued me with its messages. Akiyuki Shimbo is involved in a couple of shows like these that relate genuine human messages through fetishistically specific stories, and I think that's why I've come to appreciate his style of directing, because I understand having grown up with some of the shows that really influenced me as a person. Haruhi has always been a nostalgic property for me. I grew up watching the TV show on YouTube. Heck, I even watched this movie on YouTube. But this movie departs from the tone and general antics coked up on cliches and meta-humor that the Haruhi TV series typifies. Instead, it's dramatic. It takes a step back from the comedy and asks itself, what if someone really had to put up with the inane antics of an unaware, egotistical god? What if someone actually had to endure a time loop that lasted for centuries, while being fully capable of disrupting that time loop, yet unable to go against their role as an observer? Ultimately, it was a question worth asking, as it not only allowed me to see a new side to characters I love, but it gives the narrative a certain level of dramatic stakes that otherwise I could have shrugged off with, well, Haruhi is a comedy, so nothing bad will happen to the characters. In the TV show, character designs could drift from adorable to almost uncanny puni moe. But here they're much more relaxed and toned down. Considering that the movie takes place in an alternate universe where Haruhi isn't God, the shift in visuals makes perfect sense, and so does really everything about the film. The more dramatic and sometimes laid-back tone lends this movie to a comfortable Christmas viewing. Promare is a blast to watch. The tight direction, excellent CG, some of my favorite character designs ever. Promare is the whole fucking package, and it's a damn shame this movie hasn't gotten as good of a rap as it deserves. In general, I take umbrance with the idea that this movie doesn't have enough original material in it for it to be worth watching over something like Dead Leaves, or really any of Kazuki Nakashima and Hiroyuki Imaishi's combo works. Does this film have a message about not accepting compromise and becoming the best person you can be in spite of your circumstances, just like TTGL and KLK? Yes, but the whole idea that those two shows are wholly original is exactly the kind of new anime fan who hasn't seen jack shit mindset that I hate. Besides, neither had messages about mental illness, or as much CG, or this color palette, or these character designs. Art is all about the specifics, for me at least. That being said, the story is just as straightforward as it is predictable, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, Cray Forsyth constantly squinting his eyes and holding his hands behind his back clues you in that he's the bad guy. But there's something lovable and fun about stories that are unapologetically honest. It's more about watching the Rube Goldberg-like scenario play out rather than knowing what the final result is going to be. And that way, it really encourages the audience to get hype about each scene individually rather than caring about the overall point or the congruence between each scene. Don't get me wrong, the main point is still deep, but much less of the focus than the technical excellence on display. Towards the second turning point in the film, animator Bahi JD absolutely pulls out all the stops with a cut I can only describe as a dazzling neon orgasm, which was absolutely worth the price of admission alone. If there's one anime on this list I'd recommend you try before you knock, it's Promare. Hunter x Hunter plots a course through ideas both strange and mundane, silly and serious, heartfelt and corny. The structure and drama change on a per-arc basis to fit whatever mood Yoshihiro Togashi is feeling. But what keeps it all tied together is the relationship between Gon and Killua. The characters have literally perfect chemistry with one another. Their different perspectives, upbringings, and motivations play into each other not only through an obvious contrasting element, but also through surprising similarities. For example, Gon was raised in a quiet, isolated town where the wilderness and freedom honed his instincts, whereas Killua was raised in a lavish mansion and only gained competence through the brutality and strictness of his upbringing. But they also both grew up without anyone their age to relate to, and ironically their similar age is what helps jumpstart their friendship. Many of the other characters have similar or at least passable depth, and this is ultimately what makes the show so enjoyable to watch. The main characters are easy to read, yet fun to read deeper meaning into. I could literally watch Gon and Killua do anything with each other for 100 more episodes.
New Game is a cute girls show where all the main characters have more or less accomplished their dream. The intrigue then is more about exploring the specificities of having your dream job, the relationships you need to maintain, dealing with mild workplace drama, and how to work yourself up the corporate ladder. As someone who considers himself a creative, I appreciate the fantasy as much as I am jealous of Alba for being 18 and already working a job she's passionate about. Of course, nothing in life is as simple and picturesque as the show's visuals make it out to be. While the innate suffering of working long hours into the night just to meet deadlines is somewhat glossed over, the ultimate message of the show is that suffering is worth enduring in order to fulfill your passions. As someone who does work long hours into the night on entirely unnecessary projects like this one, I appreciate that message. This story about young girls achieving their dreams motivates me to become a better person, to make things I'm proud of, and to have fun failing along the way. There's special attention paid to taking breaks and generally treating yourself with as much love and care as you should people who you are friends with. The emphasis on all the little moments and mundanity in between you and the eventuality of achieving your long-term goals is embedded with a message about what makes life worth living, even in the absence of accomplishment. And that's just great. If I had to nitpick one small complaint, it's that it introduces a romance subplot that will never be resolved because Doga Kobo will never make a third season.
This is another show that is misunderstood and kinda underrated. Not by anyone who's smart, really. I mean, it's pretty obvious what this show is trying to do, and if you can't get behind that, then it's just kinda sad. American cartoons, think South Park, Rick and Morty right now, usually have some amount of disrespect for the audience and generally championing crassness, the lewd, the crude. This show, coming partially from a place of inspiration and respect, acts as a playground for everyone who worked on the show to flex their animation muscles, and show their inspiration, American or otherwise. After all, Imaishi's biggest influence isn't American cartoons, like some people think. It's a real dyed-in-the-wool anime veteran who pioneered the so-called Kannada style. And you can see that here and in his other works. So really what Panty and Stocking is trying to do, I think, partially, is sort of transform the Americanisms in American cartoons into Japanese anime in a way that's respectful. Like, it kind of goes through the list of all sorts of gross things to make a cartoon about, and one by one checks it off each episode. And what better way to respect those older, disrespectful cartoons than by going absolutely ballistic? The visuals in this show are perfect, the character designs are punk as fuck. If you've got an open mind, the subject matter isn't just crass, but also meaningful in ways you might not expect. Panty and Stocking is just respectful enough of its cartoon inspirations to feel Japanese, and just irreverent enough of them to feel American, and that's pretty cool. Regardless of whether or not you're the kind of fan who's jerking off to the Monogatari girls, and don't get me wrong, these characters were designed to look as hypersexual as possible, I think we can all admit they're incredibly well thought out and developed characters. Second season really gives a spotlight to these girls who otherwise would have remained mostly fat personalities, since Bake was limited to Araragi's perspective, and he is literally male-gaze the character. A lot of the stories here are just as heartfelt and emotional as Bake, but with the added pizzazz of a different main character almost every arc. I can relate to Hanekawa's sense of placelessness, and I can see some of the people around me in Senjo Garara. I relate to Nariko's inability to openly identify with her art, because when I was a kid, I did the exact same thing as her, hiding all of my writing in a closet and hoping no one would look. I think a lot of the ideas, like how Hanekawa describes her emotional counterparts as siblings rather than children, are incredibly poignant. This is Monogatari, so the directing is inspired and unique, and the bants are tippy tops. I'm a sucker for long-winded dialogue sequences done right, and second season delivers on that end as well. I recommend the entire show, but this season has always been my favorite. Shoujo Shumatsu Ryoko. Girls' Last Tour is humanity's final whimpering hurrah as the last survivors of an apocalyptic war make their way toward the surface of the giant, dilapidated structure where all of society used to rest. But it never feels quite so bleak. Our main characters are a pair of down-to-earth, sometimes chipper, mostly just hungry sisters whose unique perspectives and naivete absolutely marinate the atmosphere with a hot cup of watery, unsweetened joe, yet tang each moment with respect for life's temporary pleasures. Each episode focuses on a handful of topics in a decidedly unacademic yet still insightful way. As these girls live through the destruction of human history, they encounter many things which spark meaningful conversation between the two, but the overall focus is how the moment-to-moment reflects a decaying environment. Despite the show's worst aspects, such as the PS2-looking CG, it adds a lot to the source material, which makes the anime and manga both completely worthwhile experiences. Like the scene where the girls watch a homemade video. The laid-back tone and rounded character designs lull and relax, but make the sparse emotional moments hit even harder. And so does the music, although it might lay it on a little thick sometimes. I've listened to the OST multiple times, and I never get tired of it, though. Kobayashi's Dragon Maid is one of the most wholesome anime I've ever seen. A down-on-their-luck single otaku is liberated from loneliness by the power of love and family. Instead of being rejected for her admittedly strange infatuation with maids, Kobayashi finds a family and a friend group that genuinely cares about and respects her, even if they don't understand her passion. A lot of anime made by and for otaku have pessimistic outlooks on the habits and attitudes of hardcore infatuation with characters or fetishes, but Cool Koshinja often focuses stories on the upsides: acceptance, community, passion, some might even say family, though I think that's a bit corny. Kobayashi's Dragon Maid might be a bit escapist for those who feel so far away from feeling the kind of love and acceptance that Kobayashi and Bakutoru do. But there really isn't any harm in this kind of wish fulfillment, especially because it helps people visualize a better tomorrow for themselves. Like, not everyone's going to accept you for who you are, but when the world doesn't have your family, you really can make it for yourself. And even if Kobayashi kind of stumbles headfirst into that, you can tell she's making a genuine attempt at creating a better future for herself, and one where she isn't as lonely as she was at the start of the show. The directing isn't something people usually talk about, and it's honestly a shame because it's top-notch. Probably even better than his previous work. Every quick cut welcomes a viewer into a new vignette that always punctuates a deeper meaning, and the way it transitions between those vignettes is eminently memorable. Kill La Kill is a thrill. Pumped-up psychosexual fanaticism underlies spot-on directions that's modus operandi is showy one-upsmanship. Creative techniques punctuate moments both comedic and dramatic, all while representing the show's themes about shame. Not to mention the backdrop and setting of the show are simultaneously unique yet immediately understandable. Beyond how deep it is, the show is just fucking fun to watch. The backgrounds and character art set the mood in a world that's simultaneously a grime-filled cluster of homelessness and poverty, and also a chic, glamorous, self-made monument to one of anime's hardest of hard asses. The hard ass in question has parallels to the biggest badass of Sengoku-era Japan, and so does a lot of the story. Needless to say, there's a lot of fucking shit here, and Kill La Kill blasts through it all, riding the line between undercutting its genuinely interesting historical allusions and themes and exonerating them. No one's gonna call it pretentious, though. In fact, you're more likely to hear people write it off as dumb fun, which is honestly a damn shame. Even if I didn't think Kill la Kill was narratively deep, the value of its aesthetics and style is so immediately recognizable, I shouldn't have to point it out. Style is literally substance after all, but the fact is that I do enjoy Kill la Kill on multiple levels, at least 2 off the top of my head. Hitotsu, Satsuki is best girl. Futatsu, Hiroyuki Sawano's music kicks ass. Don't lose your way, fellow otakus. Rise the fuck up. Kill la Kill is amazing.
This movie is pure heart all the way through, whether it be steel-manning alcohol consumption in the first 20 minutes, or defining love through faded romantic encounters. The whole experience had me fist-pumping and nodding my head every single scene. The animation is just as adorable as it is abstract. Exaggerated movements and distorting perspectives obviously lend themselves to the wacky hijinks our characters find themselves pursuing, of their own volition or otherwise, but there's a surprisingly down-to-earth narrative tying it all together. Plus, Hanakana absolutely killed it in this movie, and the main girl's favorite alcohol is rum, which is my favorite too. Metaphorically, I feel like the main character's drinking experiences reflect some of the best moments I've had palling out with friends and liquor, even if Debbie Downer over here reflects my worst. It's the chance for positive encounters which ultimately weighs out the potential negatives, and really, drinking just becomes another metaphor for all of experience. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so take a load off, take out your rum, and pour yourself a cold one. I look forward to rewatching this movie anywhere in between tipsy and drunk sometime in the future.
Generally, I think people have a problem with interpreting film, and especially live-action film, a little bit too literally. I think because comics and novels are a little bit more abstract than, say, a moving image, those mediums often enjoy perspectives which have developed the muscle of metaphor. I can't tell you what the last 20 pages of Other Voices, Other Rooms by Truman Capote is supposed to represent, but I do know that it's not a value judgment meant to proclaim the literal truth of what happens when you die. Likewise, I see the tale of Princess Kaguya as a sustained metaphor, or conceit as the literary definition would have it. What exactly everything in this movie is supposed to represent, I am undecided on. But I do think a lot of the themes are more clear when viewed through the lens of abstraction and extended metaphor, such as, people don't choose the circumstances of their birth, people have potential which they will most likely not live up to, endless possibilities dictate that your life could probably be better than it is, and lastly, by the time you realize your inevitable death, it is already too late to forget. There are many things that happen in the movie between those metaphors and others which I haven't mentioned, but all of it mean a lot to me personally. I can see the best and worst aspects of my parents and Kaguya's. I understand the frustration of feeling like you're on display for the whole world with no agency of your own. The style is picturesque, yet dramatic, exaggerated, yet down to earth, but it's all extremely emotionally poignant. The music and sound design feels so emotive of a time and place that somehow is immediately understandable without ever having to live through it. Because the movie is not about the Edo period of Japan. It's about childhood and the transition to adulthood. I was Kaguya, listening to the bugs and beasts of centuries ago. I was her as she felt the dirt and built her miniature garden, and I was her as she was brought up to the moon by Buddha. It should come as no surprise to anyone that I'm a huge fan of the director Hiroyuki Imaishi, considering everything he directed from the last decade made it on this list. This show is the argument and motivation behind why anyone might find his style compelling, and it does so by bouncing between references from a couple of shows he directed, and others which he helped bring to fruition. Why do you deserve to be unapologetically yourself? It's a question which this show frames through the eyes of an insecure middle schooler who just wants to fit in. Yet her everyday life forces her to confront the weird and undesirable aspects about herself, from her point of view at least. And she's also made to question the validity of her own emotions as a stupid kid. Of course, the conclusions on both of these fronts is that LuLuCo doesn't need to fit in. Her insecurities aren't caused by legitimate issues, but by a flawed society which has caused her to value an immoral sense of normalcy. And her emotions do matter even if they are temporary. If you've ever had an adult wag their finger at you and tell you what you're feeling isn't legitimate or stupid, then I think Space Patrol LuLuCo will connect with you. I never liked how patronizing people were to me as a kid. How LuLuCo's parents are presented as equals to her is genuinely heartwarming. The only patronizing figure in the show is the villain, and his argument against LuLuCo's emotions is just as flawed and stupid as the show makes it out to be. The ending is the ultimate rejection of the status quo and whatever label society tries to put on you. And I think that's a message that kids everywhere need to hear, because society isn't always right. It isn't right even half the time. There is no moral authority, and no one should have to grow up thinking there is. Tonally, this show has the emotional range and stability of a child. It absolutely rockets through episodes and plot points. I think that's part of why it's so underrated, but even if you watched it once, I would recommend rewatching, because it's only like 40 minutes, and it's all fucking good. It's another day waking up and wishing I could crawl into one of those sleep chambers from Chrono Trigger and have Gonagai manga and Isao Takahata films laser blasted into my amygdala.